will say, it's the most sanctimonious press conference I've ever heard. It was the most sanctimonious press conference I've ever heard. We know best what's good for you. You're going to get what we give you. We're going to pass our extreme agenda. We really don't care what you think. I mean, it was unhinged. And it's just the smugness, maybe smug is a better word than sanctimonious, of Senator Jamie Peterson, the Democratic majority leader, and Senator Manka Dhingra especially. So I'll get to a little bit of that. But on the rent control, Senator Peterson, during this press availability, listed it as one of the bills that they're going to prioritize here in the final days and weeks of the session.
We're set up for a week of intense floor action on some really high priorities for us. That includes the rent stabilization bill that came from the House, as well as the permit to purchase bill, a bill updating paid family and medical leave, the parents' rights and students' rights bill from Representative Stonier are among the highlights that we'll be looking at over the next few days.
Yeah, that's great. We'll have more on parental rights in a moment, but the worst of the worst bills that they say, and if you've got the Democratic leader sitting there saying these are priorities for us, tells me they think they have the votes to put them through. So, I mean, rent control on so many fronts is going to be devastating for the state if it passes, not to mention, and I don't know, maybe this is to punish Bob Ferguson. You know, Bob made a couple key promises on the campaign trail. One of the biggest promises he made was he's going to build all these like hundreds of thousands of units of affordable housing. Builders and developers have literally been down in Olympia testifying and then speaking to lawmakers behind the scenes saying that they will scale down. They're not going to be able to build all of that affordable housing that Bob Ferguson promised on the campaign trail. So part of me is like, they're doing this just to screw over Bob Ferguson because he hasn't fallen in line with him on other things like the wealth tax, et cetera, because they're robbing him of a few of his campaign promises. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And I mean, what a weird position to be in, to think that Bob Ferguson is the only thing standing between us and the insane progressives in Olympia. I just never thought I'd be saying that. But all right. So a couple things. So yes, they're acknowledging at this press conference, this is Joe Fitzgibbon over on the House side, acknowledging that the wealth tax, because of what Bob Ferguson said, he said he wouldn't sign a budget that balances with the wealth tax because it might not stand up in court, and that would put them right back in the position that they started in. This is just fascinating, though. Joe Fitzgibbon saying, the wealth tax is off the table this year, but we'll probably revisit it because people think it's a really good idea.
We have a lot of members and a lot of members of the legislature and members of the public who would really like to see a tool like that asks the wealthiest to support public services more. And so, you know, there's definitely some disappointment among many of our members as well as many of our constituents that particular tool is not going to be part of our budget solution this year.
Yeah. Even if you have some constituents who want you to use it, doesn't mean it's a good idea. And doesn't speak at all to whether it's legal, whether it would be something the state could even carry out. I mean, Bob Ferguson didn't come out and say the wealth tax is a horrible, awful idea. I mean, it is, right? He just said that you can't balance the budget with something that we probably won't even be able to keep. So like your constituents, which I assume you mean like far left Seattleites, might, because they just scream tax the rich and everything, they might think it's a great idea. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the problem with it this session isn't going to be the exact same problem with it next session. Those problems will still exist. So if you actually care about being taken seriously when it comes to budgeting and finding revenues that will fill your deficit because you won't cut any money, then I can't take you seriously if you continue to go back to a failed policy. All right. So then on the property tax issue, we still don't know. One of the things that shocked me, I really thought, and I said on the show yesterday, that we were going to get some big budget announcement out of this media availability. We got virtually nothing from them. They are still doing all of this in private, holding their cards close to the chest, holding their cards.
Keeping their close to the vest.
Close to the vest is something else.
Yeah.
Come on, somebody's got to be keeping track of all my failed metaphors. They're keeping things on the down low. And it's like we have 2 weeks left in the session. And also people have a lot riding on this. There are people who've testified in Olympia saying, I will have to move out of my home if you increase property taxes any further. And this is where the condescension, the sanctimony, the smugness comes into play. Here's Senator Jamie Peterson. And what do I always say on the show? what is one of their very first tools and tactics when they're getting pushback over something? They'll either, they'll vilify people who are opposed to it, or they'll lie about it, right? Or the one they always fall back on is, well, you just don't get it because you're dumb. Here's Peterson.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding
we're just
about
dum-dums.
how property tax works, and I suspect that as the session proceeds, that we are likely to have a lot more discussion and public conversation to help people understand what the proposals that are on the table would actually do to their taxes and what they would not do. There's a lot of demagoguery about that.
You don't understand how property taxes work. I'm pretty sure every homeowner understands how property taxes work. And he says, we're out here just fear-mongering. No, we're telling them what is true, is that their property taxes will go up at much higher rates than they're able to go up right now without a vote of the people. That's pretty simple for individuals to be able to understand. But of course, Senator Makadingra, who's one of the biggest liars in Olympia, besides like Senator Markolius, she is one of she's a proven liar. What was one of the things she lied about constantly during previous legislative sessions? Her completely made up data around police pursuits. Completely made up. It was proven false. Even a UW study had to be like taken down and fixed. And she never acknowledged that the information she was using to justify that policy was just completely off base. In fact, she kept pushing it. So, and then also she lied about still being employed as a King County senior deputy prosecuting attorney, which we broke the news of. So this is a proven, repeated liar who's basically saying, people are being misled on what these property tax proposals will do. And then she says this.
The bottom line is our constituents want to make sure they have public schools where our kids can graduate successfully. They want to make sure that our schools are able to function in the manner they need to, that our special needs kids are getting the services they need. And we've seen public safety being mentioned over and over again for years. And the way our cities and counties fund public safety is through property taxes. And so you have to take a balanced approach, taking a look at all the needs our community has and how we're going to meet those needs.
If I knew literally nothing, I would hear that and I would say, yeah, that's right. I mean, we do fund those things through property taxes, but I know more than literally nothing. And I know that when she says, we need property taxes because our well-funded schools are schools that do well, our schools are better funded than they've ever been, and they're performing worse than they ever have. Test scores are in the toilet. Attendance is down. Enrollment is down. We have shown literal charts that show that the more money that we've given to our public school system, the worse the outcomes have been. And that even accounting for inflation and all of that. So then it's like, oh no, just give us more money through your property taxes. Don't you want good schools? Yeah, we want good schools. And schools are getting a hell of a lot of money right now, and we're having terrible results for it. So it's not even a debate anymore. This whole argument that more money equals better schools, Washington State has single-handedly disproven. It is not true. One does not necessarily equal the other, because you can take that money and you can waste it on ideological things and stuff that have nothing to do with academics, as our public school systems have. And you can spend a ton of money and have crap outcomes. The other thing that's rich there that I'm sure you've noticed and you're screaming at your screens about right now is her having the audacity to bring up public safety. How dare you? Someone who has been at the forefront of eroding public safety in the state of Washington. The driver of rolling back police pursuits. Things got so bad that even Democrats had to undo it because there was initiative. And she has the audacity to say, well, property taxes will help improve public safety. You don't care about public safety. Mrs. lying about still being a prosecutor because it looks good on my resume. And then when people accuse me of being soft on crime, I could say, how can you say I'm soft on crime? I'm a prosecuting attorney when I haven't been a prosecuting attorney for years. It's just crazy. It's like, and then people don't, you just hear it and you're like, oh, that sounds nice, but you don't get any sort of context for how asinine it is for her to be the one to talk about wanting more money for public safety. It's just insane. And if you can believe it, I started the show by saying I've heard the stupidest thing I've heard all legislative session. That's not even it. That wasn't even it. All right, a couple more things. So on the show yesterday, I'm having a lot of fun. Is it obvious?
I mean,
The
yes, it's
the
obvious.
most fun you can have while being devastated for our state. Okay. Maybe I'm just getting excited for our vacation next week. So yesterday, Republicans had a press conference that was much different from this one, night and day. Republicans had a press conference where they invited real people, real Washingtonians who own homes or rent out properties to talk about the impact that the property tax increases would have on them personally. And these were tough stories to listen to. And well, let me play first. Can I play? So one of them was, I'll just play a shortened version of it. These mom and pop landlords who stood up and basically said, look, with all this stuff, I mean, you throw rent control into the equation, right? With all this stuff, we are operating on the margins and we don't want to be constantly increasing rents, but you increase our property taxes too. What else do we do? Here's a clip from them.
You know, a lot of times we try to absorb the costs of different things that rise, you know, electricity rates, garbage rates, taxes, because we try to keep the people in the places that we've rented to them. And we've done that a number of times where we just try to, you know, basically not raise the rent. But if this goes the way they're talking about, there's going to be a lot of people out on the street. We're just not going to be able to absorb anymore.
So they're specifically talking about the impact that property tax increases would have on them and have on them as landlords, right? So Senator Jamie Peterson watched that press conference. How do I know? He suggests here that he watched that press conference, that he heard those stories. He heard that story on the impact of property taxes. Yet he still says this.
What was super interesting in the press availability this morning that I heard several young Republicans commenting about how difficult rent increases were for them. And so, you know, we're really interested in and excited about the debate about rent stabilization because I think that it really is responsive to a lot of the concerns that we were hearing even at the Republican press availability.
Yeah, so he was referring to some other commenters that had talked about as young people that, hey, you increase property taxes, like I'm never going to be able to be a homeowner. So Senator Peterson has heard all that, all these people talking about like the mom and pop landlord we talked about, the personal stories of how property tax increases will hurt them, including young people who want to be homeowners. And he turns around and says, well, maybe you should support rent control, which literally makes no sense. And as the reason I played that mom and pop landlord is because rent control and property tax increases go hand in hand and work together to create a devastating environment where people will not be able to afford a place to live. And it's a math thing, and it kind of baffles me because Senator Peterson's an attorney. I don't think he's a dumb guy. I think he's smart. So I'm trying to figure out, does he really believe this stuff, or is he saying it because it just sounds better? So you raise property taxes at a rate that really has no ceiling, right? So now you're a landlord and you're passing that cost on to your tenants, which of course you would. You're not going to sit there and constantly absorb increased costs of owning the property that you're renting out. And then the legislature comes in and limits your increases. You can only increase it so much, rent control. So what happens when your costs exceed the amount that you're able to pass along to tenants? Well, then you're losing money. And then you're going to sell your house. And it's going to be bought by a single family. It's not going to be a rental house anymore. And then we're in an even worse situation than we started off in. So it's just insane to me how he can say to people who are worried about affording homes or affording a place to live that they should support rent control. It is absolutely asinine. The other thing, and again, going back to the sanctimony, so we know that the gas tax is likely to increase 6 to 9 cents a gallon. And look, that's bipartisan. There's bipartisan support for that. State law really limits what resources can be used to fund transportation projects. They can't touch Climate Commitment Act money. Can't touch it. Hundreds of millions of dollars coming in. A lot of it you paid for at the gas pump. But no, that has to go to climate projects. Insane. So they're kind of left with the gas tax. So it's probably going to be a 6 to 9 cent per gallon increase. And I thought this was a good question by this reporter. I'm not sure who it is, but basically, you know, that is still a lot for people who've got to drive to and from work and to get their families. So what's your, I mean, I honestly think this reporter was looking for some iota of sympathy, right? Like trying to give us some human answer, some sympathy for the tax burden for Washingtonians. Please, sir, like setting him up as a softball. Like, here, knock it out of the park. Instead, here it is.
What is your message to people who are looking at that and driving an old car that takes a lot of gas, or they commute a long distance from a rural area or wherever they might be? What's your message to people who are looking at that and are like, hey?
You know, if you've got people who are commuting a lot and using the transportation infrastructure a lot, then 6 cents a gallon is a bargain for having a system that functions better.
Insufferable. Like, say something nice. Like, can we get any sort of sympathy with all the new taxes you're pushing on people? Any sort of, hey, we didn't spend wisely, we didn't do this, this, and this. We want to look at trying to use some CCA funds for the roads to alleviate the strain on drivers. Anything that suggests that there's a heart in there, you know? That there's a heart of some kind. So here's the doozy, the one you've been waiting for. I cannot believe there's so many elements of this. Maybe I've oversold it. Maybe I haven't. So one of the budgetary items that they're sort of being asked to look at is adding money to pay for additional security during World Cup for like the state patrol. So, you know, World Cup in the United States, and Seattle's going to have some games, and Seattle needs additional security if they hope to have a successful World Cup presence. So Manka Dhingra was asked about that, and it's basically not a priority for them, she says, because, well, I'll let her explain.
I'll just add, you know, this could have been an event that would have been incredible for the state of Washington. But what is happening at the federal level, people don't want to come to the United States of America. So it's going to be interesting for me to see who actually shows up and where they come from. But it is not safe for people from other countries to come to the United States right now, because people are literally being picked up from the streets and taken away.
Can you play that again? I think I need to hear it again.
I'll just add, you know, this could have been an event that would have been incredible for the state of Washington. But what is happening at the federal level, people don't want to come to the United States of America. So it's going to be interesting for me to see who actually shows up and where they come from. But it is not safe for people from other countries to come to the United States right now, because people are literally being picked up from the streets and taken away.
So we're having a conversation about potentially millions of dollars that is needed in Washington state for increased security for the World Cup because Seattle is such a gross drug den, literally because they're concerned about safety issues. So that's why they need the money, right? Oh, people don't want to come here anyway because it's not safe, not because of the safety issues that they're asking for additional security for, but because of Donald Trump. But that's not, obviously there's much more to this. It's Donald Trump's fault. The people who you're saying he's just picking up off the street, just like at random, right? Why? Because they came here, right? Because they wanted to come here. And they came here illegally. So they wanted to come to the United States so badly to flee whatever hell they were fleeing. A drug cartel in Mexico, whatever third world government corruption. They thought that this was a much safer place to be. So they came here illegally, and now they're being scooped up and taken back home. So it's not safe to be here, yet everyone wants to be here. And that's why Donald Trump is having so much activity with taking them off the streets. That's one of the craziest thing, the dumbest thing this session for sure. The dumbest thing this session for nobody will want to come here. I think they're going to want to come here just fine. The question is, are we going to give them a version of Seattle that won't leave us in the headlines saying World Cuppers attacked by, you know, mentally ill drug addicts in downtown Seattle? Or are we going to give them a version of Seattle that ideally we would see all the time? I mean, they're going to flood it with additional security anyway, which I'm not necessarily in favor of, because I hate when they do that and they come up and they clean an area and everything looks pristine and nice just for the World Cup. And then as soon as people leave, we have to live with the hell that is reality. But for Manka Dhingra, I mean, that's not, can you imagine that world every day in your head? Can you imagine that being your world, where you literally have convinced yourself that people don't want to come to the United States, even for a worldwide popular sporting event, because they're worried that Donald Trump is going to scoop them off the streets and put them in a van and it's not safe here? The only thing that's not safe about coming to watch the World Cup in Seattle is all the drug dealers and mentally ill people and repeat offenders and gang members who have whatever guns they want because they don't abide by the gun laws that Democrats push through that make it more difficult to defend ourselves.
That's actually
Insane.
a real concern in Mexico, and you're going there next week. You can get thrown in the back of a van
Literally.
for any reason.
In
Any reason.
I mean, that is the most, I know she's not white, but that's the most white privileged thing I've ever heard anyone say. That is like the most privileged. Imagine that outlook. We have people that are going to be coming in. I mean, soccer is a popular sport in some of the poorest places on earth, in some of the most like corrupt, dangerous places on earth. And they love this sport so much. And imagine thinking those people wouldn't jump at an opportunity to come here to the United States of America and watch the sport they love because it's not safe here. Imagine being that privileged that is actually your outlook on the world. It's wild.